Stanford Pines, the author of the journals, Grunkle Stan's twin brother, and one of the dumbest geniuses I've ever seen. After being foreshadowed throughout the show, Ford made his official debut in the jaw-dropping Season 2 mid-finale, Not What He Seems. He quickly became a fan-favorite character due to his swashbuckling mad scientist demeanor, complicated relationship with Stan, and the deep bond he formed with Dippo. Yet while all those things alone made him a fun character, what I found to be the most fun about him was his journey from outcast to arrogant loner to finally a person no longer blinded by their arrogance and insecurities. Growing up in New Jersey, Ford was viewed as a freak by many due to his 6 fingers and high intellect. The only person who didn't look down on him for those traits apart from his parents was Stan. Whereas others would make fun of Ford for who he was, Stan was always there supporting his brother, with the two vowing to live a life of adventure one day. Yet even with the kindness of his brother, Ford still doubted himself.
But I am a freak. I just wonder if there's anywhere in the world where weirdos like me fit in.
This lack of self-esteem would continue to stay with Ford and shape the way he would behave for decades to come. He would also later develop severe trust issues due to Stan accidentally damaging the project that would have allowed Ford to be accepted into his dream school. While later instances of Ford's anger would be unjustifiable and downright selfish, I don't see this as one of them. Even though he loved the idea of adventuring with Stan, he saw going to West Coast Tech as a chance to not only pursue his dreams, but also to prove himself to all those who mocked him. But because Stan ruined that opportunity for him, he understandably pushed Stan away even though it was an accident. Despite the setback, Ford would persevere as his interest in researching the paranormal would eventually take him to Gravity Falls, where he discovered a wide variety of paranormal creatures and oddities. Yet despite being in a place where he finally felt at home and discovering many amazing things, simply documenting those things wasn't enough for him. He felt the need to unlock the secrets of Gravity Falls and discover where all its weirdness came from. While this desire was influenced by his natural curiosity, I believe it was also influenced by Ford's desire to prove himself to everyone who ever mocked or rejected him. This is inferred in a discussion he had with McGucket in the Journal No. 3 book, when McGucket questioned why Ford felt the need to go the extra mile. With all the discoveries he made so far, he could publish that research, make millions, and retire. Yet Ford goes on to explain that if he were to do that, scientists would flock to Gravity Falls, which could result in one of them uncovering the origins of the town's weirdness instead of him. And if that were to happen, then his name would be lost to the history books. This desire for recognition resulted in Ford becoming arrogant, prideful, and unrelenting in his pursuit of knowledge. These flaws allowed him to become the perfect puppet for Bill to manipulate, which resulted in a slow unraveling of his friendship with McGucket. From what can be inferred from the journal, McGucket is seemingly the only person Ford ever allowed himself to get close to since Stan, with him trusting McGucket enough to help construct the portal. Ford greatly valued his friendship with McGucket, praised his brilliant mind, and recognized the sacrifice he made by leaving his family to help him. Yet for as much as he cherished and respected McGucket, he never told him about Bill due to fear of being judged. Furthermore, his ego would prevent him from realizing the effect that their adventures were having on McGucket. McGucket would be carried off by a Grim Goblin and later imprisoned by the Shapeshifter, both of which were incredibly traumatic events for him. But while Ford felt sympathy for his friend, he failed to comprehend just how traumatic those experiences were for McGucket. In his mind, he saw these incidents as nothing more than unfortunate bumps on the road to greatness. This naturally resulted in tensions growing between the two, with things getting even worse as McGucket fretted over Ford pushing himself so hard to complete the portal. Yet Ford was so obsessed with completing the portal that he even allowed Bill to take control of his body when he was asleep so that progress could be made even faster. Things eventually boiled over when the night before testing the portal, McGucket revealed to Ford that activating it could result in disastrous consequences. He felt that they were being reckless and begged Ford to reconsider activating it, along with wanting to know where he got the idea for this portal in the first place. Ford almost conceded to McGucket's plight and was even going to tell him about Bill until McGucket revealed that he had written a thesis paper under Ford's name that recorded all of the strange anomalies of Gravity Falls. While McGucket wrote the paper from a place of concern for his friend by telling Ford that he'd still get all the recognition and fame that he ever wanted if he were to publish the book, it felt like a slap to the face to Ford. His arrogance and unresolved trust issues made him believe that McGucket was trying to prevent him from achieving greatness instead of simply trying to save him from himself. He even went as far as to think that this was all part of a clever ploy so that McGucket himself could solve the grand unified theory of realness. Ford tells McGucket that the portal test will continue while at the same time reassuring himself that after this success he won't just be a scientist but a great one. Though of course, we all know how that went.
What?
After witnessing untold horrors, McGucket urged Ford for a final time to destroy the portal since it would bring forth the end of the world. Yet once again, Ford's hubris blinded him since destroying the portal would mean destroying his life's work. As a result, McGucket quit, with Ford becoming increasingly paranoid and unhinged as he later learned that Bill had been manipulating him the entire time. The portal wasn't to help Ford with his research, but instead serve as a gateway for Bill to enter his reality so he could conquer it. With Ford finding himself completely alone, he ends up turning to the one person he ironically could trust, Stan. When Stan accepts Ford's letter and comes to Gravity Falls, Ford explains the situation to Stan. Or more accurately, just a part of it. He only tells Stan that the portal is dangerous and that he wants Stan to take the journal which contains info on how to operate it as far away from him as possible. While Ford knows what's at stake and takes a chance by asking Stan for help, he refuses to explain to Stan the true extent of what he's been through and why this was so important. And when Stan is ready to just burn the journal, Ford tries to stop him from doing so, even though destroying the journals would have made more sense than just hiding them. And as the two fight, it's revealed that Ford still holds a grudge against Stan for costing him his dream school, even though he still managed to accomplish everything he'd set out to do. All these scenes truly highlight just how much tunnel vision Ford has developed, in which even in his darkest hour when he needs help the most, he's still only thinking about himself. The fight between the two brothers concludes with Stan accidentally pushing Ford into the portal where he would spend the next 30 years of his life traveling the multiverse. Journal number 3 reveals that Ford would spend those decades looking for a way to kill Bill, both as revenge for ruining his life and because of the threat that Bill posed to the multiverse. Now Ford isn't entirely wrong about Bill messing up his life, but blaming Bill for everything that happened to him illustrates how his arrogance is still blinding him. While he recognized that he allowed himself to be manipulated by Bill, he doesn't recognize the fact that some of the things that happened were his fault. He was the one who pushed McGucket away by not listening to his friend, along with being reckless in his pursuit of fame and knowledge. Yet it's easier for Ford to blame his current predicament on Bill rather than reflecting on the fact that he's partially to blame for being in the situation that he's in. It doesn't help that through the course of his travels, Ford begins to develop a hero complex. He truly thinks that he's the only person in the multiverse who can defeat Bill. This conviction of his only grows stronger after meeting a mysterious being named the Oracle, who told him that he had the face of the man who was destined to destroy Bill. Ford was so sure that she was talking about him specifically that it never even crossed his mind that the Oracle could have been talking about Stan. This showcases how despite growing as an adventurer throughout his travels, Ford doesn't grow as a person since he keeps letting his ego blind him and not wanting to admit to his faults. The latter especially becomes hard for him when he stumbles across a parallel world which showcases the life he could have had if Stan had done what Ford requested, since in this world, Ford became a famous scientist as a result. While the journal may not outright say it, it's safe to infer that this is the life that Ford believed that he was entitled to. After decades of travel, Ford confronted Bill once again in the nightmare realm to end him. But just as he was finally about to enact his vengeance on Bill, he's interrupted by the activation of the portal during the events of Not What He Seems, as the portal opens in the nightmare realm. Realizing that Bill's forces would invade his home if left unchecked, Ford was forced to give up on his quest for revenge and made a mad dash to get to the portal first, which leads into the aftermath of Not What He Seems. Now, because of what A Tale of Two Stans told us about his and Stan's past, along with what Journal number 3 revealed about Ford, I ended up seeing Ford punching Stan in the face in a whole new light. On the one hand, I understand why Ford would be angry. He blames Stan for getting sucked into the portal along for robbing him of his chance of finally killing Bill. Yet on the other hand, because we the audience saw how much Stan put on the line to bring back his brother, Ford comes off as ungrateful. So because of his unresolved issues and complicated feelings regarding Stan, Ford failed to comprehend the fact that his brother had spent the past 30 years trying to save him out of love and regret. As a result, he views Stan's actions as reckless, with him wanting Stan out of his home and life by the end of the summer. Yet while he may have been back home, Ford's journey was far from over. When dismantling the portal, he came across a small rift in the fabric of reality due to the portal being overtaxed. After containing it, he vowed to ensure that the rift wouldn't fall into Bill's hands, with him believing that this is a burden he must carry alone due to how sharing his burdens with others has backfired. When he tried to share them with McGucket, it destroyed their friendship. And when he tried to share them with Stan, it resulted in him being pushed into the portal. But while what Ford is saying may be partially true, he's still ignoring the fact that the reason those things backfired was his fault. He didn't truly share his burdens with them since he didn't tell them the full story. Ironically though, this changes when he forms a bond with Dippo. While unsure what to make of him at first, Ford soon discovers that the two are kindred spirits due to not just loving dungeons and more dungeons, but also sharing a passion for the paranormal. The latter especially becomes clear to Ford when he looks over the entries Dipper has written in the journal. He's impressed by all the things that Dipper has accomplished, with him recognizing that despite his age, Dipper possessed great courage, cleverness, and conviction far beyond his years. He even goes as far as to say that reading Dipper's entries felt like he was reading about a younger version of himself. By this point in his life, Ford believed that he had no one he could trust or rely on. Even throughout his travels in the multiverse, he had only met a few individuals that he could consider a friend. So it only makes sense that he would end up latching onto someone that's like him, especially when that person is someone in his own family. But because he's so enamored by this turn of events, he overlooks the fact that not all of Dipper's accomplishments were done by himself. Dipper had people in his life that he trusted, which allowed him to accomplish some of the feats that he did. But Ford was so focused on the fact that he and Dipper were kindred spirits that he ignored the key detail that made the two of them different from each other. This newfound attachment makes Ford hesitant to tell Dipper the truth about his history with Bill, in fear of Dipper seeing him as nothing but a fool who allowed his ego to blind him from Bill's manipulation. But when Dipper learns the truth, he's very understanding of what happened to Ford and doesn't hold his flaws against him. Given how he was criticized by McGucket for his recklessness, with it leading into the implosion of their relationship, Ford no doubt felt relieved when history didn't repeat itself with Dipper. With how the two have gotten closer to the point that Ford fully trusts Dipper, he offers him an invitation to stay in Gravity Falls and become his apprentice. When Dipper voices his concerns about how this would affect Mabel, Ford has this to say.
Mabel will be fine on her own. She has a magnetic personality. I watched her become pen pals with the pizza delivery man in the 60 seconds he was at the door.
Ford's view on Mabel is interesting since it's clear that he doesn't look down on her in the slightest. If anything, the scene showcases the opposite since he fully believes that Mabel would be fine without Dipper due to how he has seen how confident she is. But he fails to think about the emotional support that Dipper offers Mabel and how the two being apart would negatively affect her. He also further self-projects his unresolved sibling issues onto Dipper when he voices his concern on the matter.
Gosh, we've never really been apart before.
And isn't it suffocating? Dipper, can you honestly tell me you never felt like you were meant for something more?
Cut to the finale of the World-Mageddon saga, in which those very unresolved sibling issues result in Ford screwing up the Zodiac ceremony, since after being forced into thanking Stan for saving him, he felt the need to grammatically correct him.
Between him and me. Grammar, Stanley.
Oh, Grammar Stanley, you stuck up.
Don't jeopardize this, you idiot!
Yet while this blunder seemingly cost their one chance at defeating Bill, with Ford and Stan being in prison as Bill chases Dipper and Mabel, it results in the two elderly pines having a long overdue talk. Stan laments on how the twins are going to die just because he couldn't let things go, but Ford stops Stan from blaming himself since he admits that the whole reason they're in this situation in the first place is because he fell for all of Bill's flattery. While Ford had acknowledged several times that he allowed Bill to manipulate him, this is the first time he fully blamed himself instead of blaming others as well. The brothers lament over how messed up their relationship with each other had gotten since they used to be as close as Dipper and Mabel. Yet while those two can still work together despite it being the end of the world, Ford and Stan still squabble. I like to believe that this moment made Ford accept the fact that many of the tragedies that befell him were his fault, along with realizing that he isn't the hero that he thought he was. After all, if he truly was, things never would have gotten this bad. Ford is willing to surrender to Bill and tell him how to escape Gravity Falls since, at the very least, he may spare Dipper and Mabel. But instead, Stan comes up with the idea of the two pretending to be each other so that Ford can erase Bill from his mind since Ford himself is unable to do so because of the metal plate in his head. Now keep in mind, Ford was 100% willing to have his memory erased without a second thought if it meant destroying Bill, probably due to a mixture of guilt and his hero complex. But when Ford is forced to erase Stan's mind to destroy Bill, he hesitates. While Ford is willing to sacrifice his memory for the world, he felt guilty doing the same to Stan, even though it was Stan's plan. Stan heroically sacrificing himself made Ford realize just how foolish he had been.
He saved the world. He saved me. You're our hero, Stanley.
Recorded in journal number 3 shortly after Stan regains his memory, Ford reflects on his life up to that point and recognizes just how arrogant and foolish he had been. He had allowed his desire to be accepted by people turn him into an arrogant loner. He shunned McGucket when he tried saving Ford from himself, and he pushed his brother away for decades over an honest mistake. And due to not letting himself trust others, along with feeling the need to do things alone, Bill almost conquered the world with Stan paying for Ford's mistakes. This whole experience has humbled Ford and forced him to confront the mistakes he's made in life, with him vowing to spend the rest of his days making amends to Stan. His first step in doing so is inviting Stan to travel the world with him as they investigate the tales in reality that World-Mageddon caused. Though what makes the moment truly special and heartfelt is the reveal that after all these decades, Ford had held on to a photograph of the two of them standing on top of the original Stanner wall when they were kids. It truly illustrates that for all the decades apart and mixed feelings he felt towards Stan, Ford still loved his brother and never stopped thinking of him. While Ford may have only been around in the series for a while, The time the audience had with him was more than enough to give us an insight into his psyche, with journal number 3 simply expanding upon it. Ford is a very complex and layered character who serves as a cautionary tale of how one's desire for greatness can be blinded by their hubris. Yet he also showcases how it's never too late to recognize the mistakes you've made in life and make up for them. But what are your thoughts on Ford? How do you feel about how his character progressed? Do you wish he was in the show more? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and click the bell so you'll be notified when I make a new video. If you want to follow me on social media, you can find the links to them in the description box below. Until next time, I'm me out the heel.